Marti, I'm really glad you joined us. Design thinking is a very bespoke concept. And I think in the last 10, 15 years, there are many an attempt to almost try to define, so what is it? And I sometimes wonder if it's not like the concept of love, that if you really define it, you almost kill it. So I'm very much in the view, I don't have a need to have it clearly defined.
Good stuff, because I'm not
So,
going to define it.
With those few words, I want to say thank you for joining us, particularly at Da Vinci, because we are really on a journey of really understanding the notions of design and systems design thinking. So welcome you today, and we're looking forward to hearing your perspectives and sharing them with us.
Okay, so I'm very good at asking questions. Not necessarily that good at answering them. Well, occasionally I am, but I usually answer them with questions. So I thought that it would be useful to look at this in terms of why, when, and how. But before I do that, I want to put all of you to work and ask you to maybe, just for a few minutes, have a chat with the person next to you about what do you think are the wicked problems you face today or that the world faces today.
The wicked problem.
Wicked problem.
Wicked. I think one is that we're not solving the sustainability question. It's a problem. We create more techniques and more engagement.
And the world doesn't take a hard enough stance.
But yes, thank you. That's cosmos.
Okay, I see the sound dying down. So let me ask a question. Who of you started with what is the wicked problem? Who of you just dove in? You know, Bradley has spoken about a couple of things, changing the way we think. And the difficulty within this is if you look at neuroscience and the little we know and that we learning we didn't know every day, or that we were yesterday or this morning. Some of that says that if you look at the way your brain is designed, I don't know if you've seen the wrist model, where your wrist is the brain stem, thumb is the paleomammalian brain, that bit that causes all the trouble, okay, that dominates in teenagers, and the cortex. And your fingertips, prefrontal cortex, is where you do complex thinking, where you think about wicked problems, where you try and solve wicked problems. That part of the brain requires an incredible amount of energy. And you cannot function in that part of the brain for too long. So what you want to do is you want to move something as quickly as possible to another part of the brain that's labeled habit. So habitually, what are we? Inherently lazy. We want reliability. And the ultimate in reliability must be stockbrokers. What happens when you don't meet your forecasted budget? They chip away at your share price. What happens when you overshoot that forecast? Exactly, because they want it to be exactly reliable. That's within our nature. And that is at the heart of the problem. Is there's a part of you that doesn't want to struggle when you go home tonight to drive your car the same way you did when you learned how to drive it. Okay? You want things to become habitual. So ultimately for me, design thinking is a total ambiguity. It is a balance. It is always a balance between the analytical and the intuitive, between what is reliable and what is valid, between what is exploitation and what is exploration. Okay, and you're never going to get it right. Now, it's a very intriguing concept, and a lot of it, you said something about changing the way we think. And we all taught in school to think deductively and inductively. Okay? And that has validity, but you need to change that. And here's why you need to change it. How many of you know Bertrand Russell's chicken story? Bertrand Russell, philosopher. So Bertrand Russell said that, well, the problem with philosophy is he went a little bit insane, so don't go there. But the thing with the chicken story is the chicken gets fed by the farmer in the morning. And we're not talking about rainbow chickens, we talk about the farmer and the chicken and running around outside. So the chicken gets fed by the farmer, and then tomorrow morning he gets fed by the farmer again. And eventually the chicken begins to understand that he is going to get fed every morning by the farmer. Very reliable, and that is very true until the day becomes lunch. Then he doesn't get fed by the farmer anymore. Then he feeds the farmer. And that's the problem with reliability, is that it's great if you want to deal with small problems. It's the when. Reliability has a place. You want to deal with small problems. The thing is, when the big things hit you, like the iPad, you're not ready for it because your reliability didn't plan for that. And that's where you need to look at what is valid. Make sense?
Yeah.
Now, Roger Martin, and I have to admit I'm a bit of a fan, I like his concept around design thinking, talks about that these things have, it's an iterative process. The IDEO, Kelly brothers talk about an iterative process as well, is that constant circular testing process. But Roger Martin talks about a funnel, and that the funnel has to start with what is the mystery, and then it has to develop into a heuristic. I'm not particularly fond of the word. I like the word sense making. You want to make sense of the mystery. And then you want to move to an algorithm. And ultimately, the same thing you said about top down and bottom up. At some point in an organization or in your own life, you have to be slightly multiple personality-like and be in all three. And we need that everywhere. So design thinking is not about the arts, but the arts is an interesting example of design thinking. If you go back several centuries ago, the biggest mystery that faced painters was how do we show what is three-dimensional onto a two-dimensional surface. And so they tried to make sense out of that. How do you show that? And they tried different things. The heuristic, the sense making. Until Brunelleschi stumbled across the algorithm in the early 15th century, which is the vanishing point. And so that became the rule for everybody. And you can shift the vanishing point, it depends on where you stand and what way of the street you want to look down, and some people kind of mix that up, you know. But ultimately, even in the arts, there's an algorithm. So Bradley's story was very interesting for me because a similar one that I find quite fascinating in terms of this, that balance is Procter & Gamble. When Lafley took over, the company was in big trouble. You had the Walmarts and everybody else that would start selling their in-house products. And when he took over, he was fairly young. It was an internal appointment. They only appointed internal people. He was in his late 40s. You sit where I sit, that's young. Some of you, maybe that's not young. Okay, like there. But you sit here, it's young. And he did that. He managed that. So certain parts of the organization, the ones furthest away, in sort of, from the customer, was the ones that was on the algorithm phase. Sales, marketing, HR, IT was in the algorithm phase. But then he had on the other side, he had people, and he that top-down, bottom-up thing, what Lavely did is he said, I want everybody to understand what the principles of design thinking is. It's a tool. Okay. And so he had brought in outside people, the very complicated restructuring around that. But the principle was that you would have people that would delve into the mystery. They would go and they would really look at what customers are doing. They would go into their homes, not focus groups, not questionnaires. They would go and watch what people are doing. Ask them, why do you buy this specific soap for your children instead of this one? This one is cheaper, it's better, whatever. Why do you buy this one? Because bath time for my children is about fun, and this is in interesting shapes, and we're collecting the shapes. As opposed to the standard, what is the best product and best for the children. Okay. It wasn't what motivated the parents. So it's delving into the mystery, going into the detail of exactly what do customers do. And there's a couple of other very interesting examples around that. That's maybe not the standard Apple type of examples. But what Lavely did is he had these people, and in the minute they started beginning to get everything. This is where the wood and the trees get very confused. You want to know everything. That's what makes it expensive. That's why finance people don't like it. Is you need to delve, because you don't know where's the outlier that's going to start making sense for you. Then you want to move it into sense making. What do we do with this? How do we change our products? What you had to do. And then you want to move it into an algorithm. How do we get it out the door timeously looking exactly the same? That always has to be the algorithm. Okay, so it's not about, it's interesting, I mean, I'm a huge Da Vinci fan, the original guy. The reality is that's not the answer. He never finished anything. So the answer is not just to innovate and be creative. The answer is, can you push this down the funnel, and can there be constant motion? Yeah? So
Is that the truth?
there's no truth.
So why must we push things down the funnel?
Because, well,
To make money.
yes.
Yes.
So
Ultimately,
so is that the
that's
sense that we make out of it?
Well, you see, for me, if you ask me what is the wicked problem, I would say to you capitalism.
Okay, so we're making sense, we go down the funnel, we get the algorithm, and we
Yeah.
make money, and that becomes the next wicked problem.
Yes.
So we sort of,
So one of the examples
On a
that's
closed loop.
really interesting, anyone of you ever heard of RIM,
yeah.
research in motion?
Yes.
BlackBerry,
Yeah.
where are they today?
No, Barry.
So they got this right in the beginning in terms of delving into the mystery. what is it? So I know Job said that customers don't know what they want, okay? But what RIM did very well was to go and have a look at, well, I want my email with me where I go. I want it wireless. How do I want it? How do most of us look at our email? You don't read everything. You look who it's from. You look at the first line or two, and then you decide whether you're going to open it or read it or not. So he delved that deep into the mystery. And they came up with the pull and the whatever else, and it worked very well. And here's the problem, as the company became too big. And that's what the Sappi example is interesting for me. The P&G one is very interesting for me. It's really, really hard for big companies, unless they're dying, to get this right. And the minute they get it right and they become successful, they get it wrong again. Because they don't want to engage the prefrontal cortex, the complexity, the wicked problems, the mystery. Anyone read Taleb's Anti-Fragile? Okay. He's not a nice guy. He writes brilliant. And he says a couple of really interesting things, which relates to this for me, is that if you want to survive, you need to deal with anti-fragility. Now, one day I'm going to find a linguist who's going to come up with a better word, right? It's not me. Look there, maybe. The thing about, and any one of you know of his thing about black swan?
Yeah.
Okay. So, if you look at that, those things that we think, oh, we could have predicted that. Okay, so take yourself back to before cell phones existed. Now you cannot imagine that you didn't predict it. Okay. The whole concept around anti-fragility is that things are messy, accept it. And accept the fact that we're lazy, we want things to be structured, we want it to be reliable, we want it to be the same, and it's not. And live with that paradox. Yeah? The other example that I find fascinating in this is, any of you heard of Herman Miller? Not a person, a company. They make office furniture. And this is an interesting example for me of where marketing becomes an algorithm, okay? Is they designed that chair with the things and the up and down and the, you know what I mean, standard office chair, okay? Then they decided that they need to relook this. So again, they got in, interestingly enough, outside designers to go and delve into the mystery, go and watch what people do. And you also mentioned people, it's that same thing, it has to be people-centered, okay? And they watched that people would sit in the chair for a while and then they start fidgeting, okay? And it's not that they need Ritalin, it is just that they get hot. So they redesigned the chair where the seat and the backrest is a mesh so that it can breathe. And then they did the focus groups. And what do the customers say? Potential customers say? Hate it. Ugly. Don't want it. And then they went to their marketing people and they said, we're going to launch this. We believe in this. With a flourish, it became the best-selling office chair ever. And that's where marketing is an algorithm. It's that understanding of what is it that what do I do to sell this thing that people say is ugly so that they want it? Yeah? So, why is nobody asking me questions? It was interactive, right?
I think
Yeah.
the design, if you ask us as
I
well.
have a question.
Yeah.
Can all this be contained in one person?
No.
Because by design, we go down a sort of educational training route.
Yeah.
to build the algorithms within us.
Yes.
And now you're asking for the other side of the brain to wake up. So how do you bring about this if you've got a structure in which you've got mostly algorithm type operations?
Tony, I think the question is not just no, it's yes and no. I think you have to, or most of us have to try and do this for ourselves. So if you look at self, if you look at who you are and how you run your life, then generally at any given point in time, there are certain things where you're looking at the mystery, certain things where you're trying to make sense, and certain things where you're trying to establish an algorithm. Okay? Like hygiene is an algorithm. Okay? You know you have to do it, you might change the detail around, but you know you have to do it. Okay? There's certain things that you might want to make sense of as you go through your life. Children leaving the house, changing a career. And then there's some parts of it that's a total mystery, where you have to do a lot of exploration. In terms of when you go wider than that, when you look at a company, I don't think one person can do it. What I think is important from a leadership point of view, it's I would be intrigued, for example, to know from Bradley, when he walked in after 3 years and several million and he said this didn't work, what made the people in the room decide that he shouldn't fall on his sword? Because that's typically what companies do.
Sorry, sure.
Okay. So what is that? Because within this entire iterative process, there's a lot of mistakes. So what is it? And that's what you need. So the interesting thing about Apple is that Steve Jobs wasn't the designer. The designer is Jonathan Ive. But Jobs knew he could recognize it. But for the same token, he would also drive the algorithm. So it's not about being able to do all of it in that grander scale, but understanding where it needs to be done. The delivery, the look, that absolute phoning David Kelly in the middle of the night and saying to him, the screw inside the machine, what does that look like? Okay, that's the algorithm. But the fact that the outside, and that has to be, you want it to be reliable. You don't want to open your phone or your Mac or your iPad and it's not reliable. So that has to be reliable. But there has to be validity in the design. So especially at the top of an organization. So you have these differences. So with RIM, it was very much a top-down thing. In some companies, you have a bottom-up thing. Okay. Guy Laliberté, who created Cirque du Soleil, was very much a top-down thing. Okay. Lafley at P&G created this thing where he said, I don't want top-down or bottom-up at that scale anyway. He appointed somebody as the head of design, and she recently retired. But her job and what she said she was going to do, and he agreed with that, is that everybody don't have to be a designer, but they have to understand what design thinking is. And they have to understand when do you have to move through which process. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So in terms of, sorry, yes, Samantha?
You said something about people not doing what they want. And the example you gave right now about after the seat or a chair has been designed, something it's rubbish. And they sent marketers who went and used some fancy floor just to push it down the throat of it before it became a big bang. Okay. Now, has anybody found, is it really true that people don't know what they want? Or is it that, or is it that there are some people who decide for people
What they should want.
Yes,
Oh,
what they
yes.
want, yes.
Absolutely.
So in that case, actually, if you read The Republic by Plato,
Yeah.
there's a place where they say that people should not be allowed to open their mouth and say. Some people should tell people what they should say.
Yeah.
That is politicality. Because they say that some people don't know what they want. Therefore, if you allow them to talk, they'll talk heresy. So in that case, when you talk about algorithm, or recipe, you are actually saying that anybody who discovers, maybe from an ontological perspective, the nature of being, anybody who discovers the nature of being of a thing, okay, will be able to decide for the people what that is from the ontological perspective. So in that case, you probably will be saying that we shouldn't go to election. People should not cast their vote. They don't really know who the president should be. There are some people who should determine who the president should be, the qualities the president should have, and they will bring the president to the society. And that will be the case, not a bunch of ignorant people going to decide who is going to be the president, and they will do it. So I don't know. It looks like you read quite a lot of philosophy. So where do you stand in this?
First of all, I really believe people don't know what they want. Okay. Egypt's a case in point. People know what they don't want. They haven't translated that into what do they want. People are very quick to tell you, I don't want this, I don't want that, but they don't know what they want. And they don't consider what the price would be for what they want. In terms of politics, I definitely plead the fifth. I think politics is a wicked problem. And the best form of government is a wicked problem. In an ideal world, I would like to believe if we can teach people to think for themselves and think differently, then democracy could work.
That's a question. So, Randy, you guys, you work for Sappi, right?
Yep.
You guys own that plant somewhere in Malacca, right?
Yeah.
That place smells too much here, right?
Yeah. How would you know it's not us if it didn't smell?
You should be able to model something that will stop that smell.
Technology.
I to that place on television, I have to hold my nose for a very long time. I have to test that. I have to hold my friends. Since we don't to drive over that place. That is really good. I'm just talking now. That's all I want to tell you.
Can I just ask, so what do you think makes, it seemed to me that, for me, part of a wicked problem is that we've got a default to the algorithm.
Yes. We're comfortable in that.
So when we speak the workplace, and almost, we're not even in a post-industrial era, we're still in that, because we still speak the language of the normative workplace, the algorithm. Where can we make money? How can we push product? And I'm almost intrigued, why do we keep believing that is a sensible existence for humankind?
Personal opinion is, and it is the wicked problem of capitalism, is capitalism is based on the premise that you have to keep on growing. And I think inherently a lot of people know that's not sustainable. They don't know what to replace it with. I mean, it was my biggest, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, amusement that when the recession started that the standard phrase was, let's spend ourselves out of a recession. We spend ourselves into one. How's that same thing going to work to get us out of it? So that is really a wicked problem. So do you have to do this to make money? Ultimately, you know, Michael Dell said he finds it interesting that every fair he goes to, he sees a lot of technology that serves no purpose. People designed it for the hell of designing it, okay? Just to be innovative, to be creative, to have fun. And it has no practical application. So the framework that design thinking falls within is to say, maybe there's a role for that, but ultimately what design thinking is about is that you solve a problem, it has to be feasible, and it has to have a business case. So can you apply that we spoke outside about education? I mean, you look at what these guys are doing with the Cipro schools, but there still has to be a business case. And is that model right? Probably not. We just don't have a better one. So ultimately it comes back to survival. We want to survive. How are you going to survive if you don't have means to provide the basics for that survival? And that's relative. What you and I might regard as survival. But I think it is what we have to work with. And I like this concept because of the iterative process. So yes, sometimes you reinvent the wheel, but generally people cope with change better when it doesn't happen too fast. So that you move things. You want to move away from capitalism. I think the last 100 years have proven that the flip doesn't work.
But I think from a design thinking point of view, we at Da Vinci at least would like to, and I like your view on the both and, because it is about the mystery and the algorithm. It's almost the both and how do we keep combining these three dimensions so that you've got an ever-changing landscape and not necessarily the growing of the big corporate and the demise of the small enterprise, but that you bring the two worlds closer to each other. And I think that's a value of design thinking that we haven't explored enough.
But I think that for me is around the how. And ultimately the how for every individual is to understand that the lens that you look at the world, your world view affects the tools and the knowledge you acquire. And can you change that? So if you function in a very strict academic environment, you're going to start, I recently helped a client with his MBA research proposal, and I was amazed at how he wanted to go to Cron's Alpha. It's got nothing to do with what you're doing. Okay. But it was required by the business school.
Yeah.
It's McKinsey saying that management is going to become more and more science. It's going to become more and more of an algorithm. So far that hasn't worked. So it is about the individual, and then yes, but for me it starts with the individual. Understanding what I believe and how I look at the world influences the tools I gather, the skills I acquire, the knowledge. And can you change that? Can you, instead of buying another book on the same topic that you like, can you actually go onto a topic you know nothing about? So what are the things that you do on a daily basis that make you question what you knew this morning when you woke up? That's why I say there's no truth. I mean, neuroscience is a fabulous example of that. We all thought you have a left and a right brain. You don't. I mean, physically, yes, but I mean, not in the sense that people think you do. You use 10% of your brain. That's a very interesting concept, because if you didn't use the rest, it would, like an almond plaster, die off.
Yeah.
It would literally rot. So we have these, and there's more detailed things, okay? But that the left-right brain thing, people still write articles about it. And it's been proven wrong. It's Galileo over again. The previous Pope who's now being canonized, when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, not that long ago, said the Church was not necessarily wrong in condemning Galileo. We want reliability. What will it take for you to give up reliability, to believe it's okay, that what I knew yesterday is wrong today, and that's okay?
What do you say to when Kahneman talks about our overinflated ability to think we're correct?
It's a survival thing. You know, I read research. I'm a grumpy scientist, right? So if you want to give me research, it better be done well. And I read research where they interviewed thousands of executives in companies, and 75% of them thought they were in the top 25% of their profession. Okay. Now, my imagination just tries to see this squeeze into the top of the pyramid, okay? This bulby top of the pyramid. We all do that. From a very simple point of view, it's that concept of it's an attribution bias. It's that thing of, if you and I apply for a job and we on the short list and you get it and I don't, then generally my view will be you were lucky. But if I get it and you don't, then it's deserved. And for the same token, if I make a mistake, oops, a mistake. If you make a mistake, you're just a bad person. We all do that. Except for the minority who undervalue themselves. That's a different one. Yes, Emeka.
It's possible that the human mind, brain, if you look at maybe 3,000-4,000 years ago, we were not dressed like you are dressed.
No, I would be burned at the stake.
That's the point. And we survived so many difficult environmental and living conditions. And through science, technology, design, innovation, research, and the rest of that, we have come to a point where I feel so uncomfortable anytime my cell phone is not in my pocket. I feel like I've been lost in the another universe, that kind of stuff. So you wonder if I feel this uncomfortable because I don't have my cell phone with me. How did people feel? How did they feel 2004, 2003 when there wasn't? Okay, 2003 when there wasn't cell phone here. You get it? But now then, imagine how they felt 3,000 years ago when probably very few people wore dresses and all this stuff. But we have actually advanced. And that's an advancement of the human mind, the human brain. And I think somebody read something, I forgot this guy's name, talked about the possibility of perfection.
Oh?
Perfection.
Yeah.
Okay. So that we eventually going to become perfect. The mind is definitely going to become perfect one day.
Well,
in that case, what the validity, the unreliability and invalidity that we are dealing with today, we have actually approaching perfection and probably getting to it means that we will be at a point where we would be able to predict change the last measurable digit of mathematical calculation or something like that for those of you guys who are so we'll be able to do that. So we'll be able to know exactly what is happening in your mind and you know what is happening at night. I know tomorrow, how you guys are going to be tomorrow. But we will live beyond time or something like that.
Hey, Maker, that's not going to happen in my lifetime.
No, not now.
Not in future or Ishmael's lifetime, is here's why I think that's not going to happen. It's a moving goalpost. Is if you look at astrophysics, then do you want to guess how much of the universe we know what it is? The percentage. How much do we know what is it?
Minimum.
Minimum. A number.
It is
Almost
numbers.
insignificant nothing.
5%.
Yeah.
No, it's not 5%.
5%. We know now 5%.
The whole universe.
Yeah.
Tomorrow we might
The rest is called, dark energy and dark matter. We call it that. We know what it is. 5%. And maybe what we're going to know tomorrow is that actually we were wrong. We only knew 1%.
But isn't it? Oh, sorry.
Shirley.
I found it very interesting what you were saying, and I found it rather dark.
Yeah.
Very like a dark comedy type
Yeah.
of thing. And it was funny.
That's the idea.
But I have a different view as well.
Sure.
I believe what you were saying, I think the reason people are still here and going is because there is something inside of a human being.
Yeah.
Whether it be hope, whether it be self-belief, whether it be something. And I think it's also that people maybe don't like rigidity, repetition, all of those things, that maybe people have something inside of them that really want to explore new, different things. So it's sort of a yin-yang type of a thing. So for me, design thinking has to reflect both.
Yes.
I think, yeah.
And so I'm just, as I say, saying there is another side. There's it's not a dark comedy only, there's also something different.
No,
I hate repetition and things.
Yeah.
I would get bored. I don't want to fall into what you were describing as this comfort place. That's everything that I'm not. Now I'm worried because maybe I'm very stupid there.
No, not at all. You're fabulous, and I think it's great. Okay. The thing is, how many people do you know who are like that? It's intriguing for me that I would sit in on interviews, and the minute you ask the candidate, what questions do you have? What's my career path? I want structure. I want to know. Okay. And then they're in an environment where things change fast. They apply for a job where things have to change fast. So Benny and my friends and I are talking about education. And the interesting thing is what you're talking about is what children are inherently, we're born that way. Okay. You're born to want to color outside the lines. You're born to want to see things that are different from what is presented to you. Our education system forced that out of you shortly after. Sit in that chair and add up 1 and 1. Okay. And so some people manage to retain it, and then we go through all of this to try and get it back, to help people remember. So yes, I tend to veer into the cynical side, but you're absolutely right. Inherently, there's something in us that want mystery.
Can I just make a comment on that? One of the interesting things that we did was, when I started out in terms of thinking why we think the way we think, we found out within an organizational context that the vast majority of people don't want to have to think. And I mean, you all know the rice grain on a chessboard scenario. How many people know how many rice grains are on the last square? It's 9 quintillion. How many know what's on the 32nd square? Well, what I'm getting at is very few people will investigate the second half of a chessboard question versus the first half, because the first half we can actually get it. You know, at 32nd it's around about 4 billion. But then it just goes crazy after that. And what we found was that most people, when they think thinking is intuitive and immediate. When they have to delve into their thinking, it then becomes problematic, and they don't want to go there. So even at management level, it's a real issue when you're dealing with leadership, for instance, that says, I don't want to have to worry about that. Yeah, but you've got to worry about the iPad. It's going to kill our industry.
But that's that from a scientific point of view, that prefrontal cortex. To do that level of thinking, you have to work hard. And we're lazy. We don't want to do that. Other than the fact that it gets bluxamed out of us when you're 5.
But another perspective is Goldman's perspective that says the prefrontal cortex is only in the very, very initial stages of development. So to come back to Emeka's comment on perfection, we get tired because that thing is almost only a few 100,000 years old, but it's just starting to develop. So in a more positive note, I think I almost want to say, can you imagine what will be the shape of our face once the prefrontal cortex has developed in the next 100,000 years?
Well, you see, you're assuming that it has to go with size.
Well, I think it must get space, because if you look where it was...
It's about connections. We just make more connections.
We just visited the gorillas lately, and they share 92% of our genetic pool. Now you could see the flat. There's nothing here. Well, we've lived, this thing has grown. It'll be interesting to know, maybe we're going to get horns like this. Any last comment? Our time is running out. Any last comment?
No, just maybe a question, okay, is that I would like everybody to think about. What are you doing every day to explore the mystery of your own life?
Wife or life, sorry.
Either or, you welcome, Brad.
Because I do that every day.
Is it possible for us to simplify the mystery?
Why do you want to?
Why would you want to?
We have to
Be in
find
control.
To be in control. To be
Or maybe you don't need to be in control.
There has to be
That is where science is taking us.
Emeka, do you know exactly what is going to happen to you when you walk out of here this afternoon?
Frankly speaking, I do not know for sure, but I have an idea.
That's okay. You see, that's the thing. No certainty.
But
Why don't you
that's
ask
the
them?
point. We are going to develop a scientific system that enables us to do that. That can happen. Somehow I think we are going to get there. Something scientific. Physicists will be able to find out.
I wouldn't put my trust in physicists if I was you.
Let's take a last comment from Paul and then we conclude.
I mean, I lived in a generation, or through a generation, that came from work and play are not related to something very different. And I don't want to even label it. Those are very significant changes, mindset changes. I mean, I do yoga in the mornings. I stand on my head just to look at the world differently. Because that's the provocation I need at my age or whatever, because I know I've got to remain flexible, just in physical and in my mind. But those changes are happening as we are developing, or as we are going on. I don't even label it with developing. I think we're going, I mean, particularly you're going into capitalism, I think it's a dead end, a struggle of cruel immensity. We're looking at the banking fraternity imploding. I mean, if you read certain books, people get arrested for selling fresh milk because it's not FDA approved in America. I mean, these are developments we want. Sorry, I'm on the change. We can manage change, but I certainly agree with one of your early comments. Step by step by step. You can't do that to people normally, unless you are probably in this room, where much of the thinking that Da Vinci, the Institute promotes is that, do we need to be doing, or question what we were doing yesterday? Is it right to continue doing it tomorrow? just to ask the questions. I love you. Yeah, just ask questions. Don't worry about the answers. The questions are up there. We may not like them. They're there. Sorry. I love what you were saying.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you very much. If there's not any pressing other comment, let's continue having some refreshments outside. But from my side, Marti, thank you very much. I really appreciate the both and discussion, and I even think the notion of the funnel, the mystery, and ultimately the algorithm. I think being constantly aware, where are we playing? Because I do think we fall prey potentially to the algorithm, whether through cultural or a process of culture over time, whatever the reason may be. And I really think Da Vinci's his intent is to say, well, let's embrace the other dimensions, because hopefully therein will be more energy and more creativity that will happen. Thank you very much for spending your time with us. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.